who are in North America. And you've both had and still continue to have a very international perspective, both because of where you've lived and worked and traveled, but I think your outlook. And I think that's something, having moved to St. David's myself, I'm Australian, I've had an international career in international charities. I feel very, very at home here because so many people bring that kind of looking out as well as looking in perspective. So I think that's been reflected in the festival so far. So we're going to have I think I heard some highlights of your discussion last week and found it very stimulating and exciting. I won't be talking very much, but I am going to introduce you, and I'm going to keep an eye on the time and any questions that people want to put in the Q&A if you're here joining us through Zoom. And I just wanted to thank everybody, though, who made this online festival happen. It's the first time we've had a St. David's Festival of Ideas. It was, of course, planned 18 months ago when we thought it would be live, and we had a very lively community meeting in St. David's School that I went to, and lots of ideas thrown around. And then there was the disappointment of how could we do it in lockdown. And eventually a few of us, myself included, but particularly Ivor Thomas, Patrick Nash, John Osman and others behind the scenes who've come along to particularly provide all this fantastic technical support, which is essential for an online festival, and to everyone who's agreed to talk. So thank you very much to both of you. We do need donations to continue next year. So if anyone would like to donate, you can do that through the website. So, to start off with, I'd like to welcome Professor Mererid Hopwood, who recently became the chair of the Welsh and Celtic Studies faculty at Aberystwyth University. She was previously Professor of Languages and Curriculum, excuse my pronunciation, Cymraeg, close enough, in the University of Wales, Trinity St. David. For those who don't know, that's in Swansea, I think, and Carmarthen. She won the National Eisteddfod-Wales Chair, Crown and Prose Medal, and Welsh Book of the Year Prize for Poetry in 2016 for her collection of poems. Wow, that must have been a big year. She's been Children's Poet Laureate of Wales, Bard Plant Cymru. I'm not a Welsh speaker yet, as Mererid told me to say the other day. And in 2018, won the Tiernan Nog Prize for her writing for children. She's composed words for musicians, visual artists and dancers, and has taken part in literature festivals all over the world. She's also a translator, translating many works of literature into Welsh, including plays from Spanish and German. She's a fellow of the Learned Society of Wales, University of Wales, Trinity St. David, and the Academy Cymraeg, and honorary president of the Waldo Williams Society. And we're going to hear some of Waldo Williams' poetry today. And thank you for joining us. And then also we have with us the very Reverend Dr. Sarah Rowland-Jones. Two very impressive women. I'm very glad in this week of International Women's Day, who has been the Dean of St. David's for nearly 3 years and an Anglican priest for over 20 years. Ordained in the church in Wales, she's also served in the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. Before that, she was a British diplomat for 15 years, including postings to Jordan and to Hungary. Her doctorate in the philosophy of religion had the short title, Doing God in Public, I like that, reflected her concern that Christians should play an active and constructive role in a pluralist world. I think we're going to hear a bit more about that. Through constructive engagement, Christians should contribute constructively to the shaping of moral, rational societies in which individuals can flourish within flourishing communities and all living sustainably. This is obviously very much reflected in the Festival of Ideas. So we're going to hear from both of you. I'm actually going to disappear. But I know that we're going to hear about meaning, being, and knowing in both English and Welsh in reference to poetry. And I know, Mererid, you're going to bring in the poetry of Waldo Williams, and of course, about spirituality. And hopefully, we're going to enrich our understanding of those words, which sometimes I think can lose their meaning and maybe we lose our connection to them. So I'm actually going to ask Sarah, if you wouldn't mind, to just start, and then we'll see, obviously, what Mererid is going to say in response. So thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Amanda. Thank you. It's lovely to be here and to be able to contribute not just on the steering side of things. I think you're right about spirituality being a word that needs a little bit of careful handling because, and has it lost its meaning? If Bishop Joanna were with us, she would say that she hates the word because too often it seems to have acquired a sort of dualism, as though it's a bit of a sort of slightly self-indulgent, self-focused thing, stepping back from being engaged with the rest of the world, being engaged with the rest of one's own life. Whereas when Mererid and I were talking earlier, I quite like the word, but because I see it as reflecting just one particular dimension of what it is truly to be human. And I'll jump in with my Jesus quote now, because I think it's such a useful one. And he was asked, how should we live? And he said, the two commandments sum up life. To love God with heart and soul and mind and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. To have your act together as a human being. It entails your heart, your emotional life, your soul, your spiritual life, your mind, your intellectual, but the thinking life, as well as the feeling life, the thinking life, the spiritual life, and all your strengths, our embodied life, our physical life, whether it's our physical health or the nature of how materially we live in the world with the roof over our heads, clothing, food, all of that, financially, economically, but also there's neighbor as self, because all of us are individuals in relationship with other individuals, forming community and society. And so it seems to me that to be human beings and to flourish, you need to have a joined upness amongst all of that. And within that, you create space for what you want to call soul or spirit, but in a way that helps you to live richly with and for others within the world, rather than it being a sort of self-centered, self-indulgent thing. Mererid.
Yeah, over to you. Well, yes, when I saw the title of our talk, I thought there must have been a mistake, because anybody who knows me will think that it's somehow hypocritical that well-being word. I'm not famous for being able to chill out, and I think that's maybe what some people think that it means, and the mindfulness is like a stepping back. But you're right. Let's look at it in another way. The Welsh word for spirituality, ysbrydolrwydd, is even more odd than the English word. And we tend to say yr ysbrydol, the spiritual, that which is of the spirit. And I think when you think about it like that, it is easier, well, certainly for me, to comprehend. Then that word mindfulness that we sort of put in the same camp, again, the word we would use is meddwlgarwch, and that first element, meddwl, means mind, yes, but it also means thought. So I suppose creating time or space to think beyond the material is there, but then the question is thinking about what, and as you hinted there, Sarah, I think you talk about Bishop Joanna and why she doesn't like the word, and it may be because of those elements of self in the selfish way that comes through. That's not probably what we think. And as we agreed that I would find a Waldo quote for the different stages of our talk, then what comes to mind here is when he says in his sonnet Cymru Ni'n, chwiliais drwy gyntedd maith fy mod, a chael deunydd cymdogaeth. Now, what does that, how do we translate that into English? It's very difficult, of course, but chwiliais drwy gyntedd maith fy mod. I searched through the vast lobby of my being. Now that's an interesting image, isn't it? Because what he's saying there, that he himself doesn't exist as just the body. It's not just the skeleton. It's not the bones and skin. He doesn't end there. His being is a vast lobby. Now, which bit of the house is the lobby? It's that bit which connects the inside and the outside. It's like a cloisters. It takes us from the in to the out. And that's how he imagines himself. And I think that element of the spirituality, that thing that can reach way outside of us and back into us, is something that we do tend to neglect, and at our peril. And then comes that's the image. But then what does he find? I searched that and I found the stuff of neighborhood. Deunydd cymdogaeth. And we've been talking today, and I've been listening in the conversations about that sense of belonging and so on. And in Welsh, I think that it's not so much community as it is the neighborhood, a gymdogaeth, which recognizes that we live together as neighbors. So those were the thoughts that came to my mind.
Because I think when we were talking about mental health earlier this afternoon, we were contrasting. We talked first about connectedness, and that seemed very important. But then we said, actually, it needs to be more than that. It's the quality of the connectedness, relationship. And so I'm wondering, actually, this is a thought which has struck me new since our conversation earlier in the week, whether part of what we're exploring today, actually, is the sense of building not just the spirituality and well-being of individuals, but that sense of the corporate, the community spirituality, that sense of the soul of St. David's in a fuller sense, that sort of common, deeper sharedness. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned earlier was that need about it for attentiveness, because during lockdown and all of that, I found that the white noise that's coming at me from spending too much time on tech and not enough time out and about actually it's really quite a battle. And so I suppose it's not that we're hypocrites, but we're going to unpack some of the stuff that we struggle with, the struggle to find that place of deep listening. And I know I dabble a bit in poetry, and there's a great tradition of poet priests in Welsh Anglicanism. But one of the things that links it is that capacity to listen deeply, and to questions, to be attentive, and to perhaps in that listening to let the white noise settle, and actually realize that there are in the still small voice, whether it's of God or of life, to make sure we are paying attention to the things that have true value, rather than the noise of the lobby. Sometimes you have to sift the lobby and see what the nugget is there that isn't overlooked.
Yes, and that's one of the things that this lockdown has given us in parts, I suppose, is certainly at the start of it, once we got over the sort of the shock, was that opportunity to sort of stand back. That was before the whole Zoom thing kicked in, and then everything got even busier somehow. But there was a little bit of time there to stop and listen. And you were talking earlier about tourism. This is one of the things that I always hope we'd be better at it, and especially in places like Pembrokeshire, it is very easy just to see the landscape, to see the beauty of it. It's not so easy to listen. And that listening includes the people who are there, the stories who have been there from forever. It goes, the names of the fields, the names of the homes. Thank goodness that we're going to have a law that people can't change the names, because there's so much there. And I think when we go as visitors to somewhere else, enjoy the beauty of what you can see, but try to listen as well, because you'll notice. I think of that famous, I like showing this to my students, that famous Bruegel painting, which is called The Fall of Icarus, but of course you can't see Icarus, so that's the point. And you have to be able to be that attentive to find it, and W.H. Auden has explained it so gloriously. But we are too busy. Delicate, expensive ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out from the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on, and we're sailing away without looking and seeing. Yes, you're for sure, you're right there.
Yes, and I think one of the other things we talked about in this whole shift of spirituality and well-being is moving away from that sort of well-being that's tangled with the world's view of what it is to be successful, and to be able to set that aside a little bit and to reshape the question of what it is. We talk about we're not human doings, we're human beings. And actually part of that attentiveness is to allow us to be. And you wanted to talk about the verb mind.
Yes, the well-being, again, I looked at it because that's a strange word. And of course, you can always tell that these are words that you can't really import from one culture to the other when you have to have a long list of words that try to explain it. So in the Welsh dictionary, you have cysur lles daioni ffyniant, which means comfort, benefit, profit, goodness and prosperity. So there's all those things. But of course, that word being is there. And going back to the beginning of lockdown again, I was asked to write something, I suppose, to try to hang on to a sense of hope and togetherness, and in that moment when the rug seems to be pulled from under your feet, I found that I was just drawn to the verb to be. So if we can hang on to that as some kind of an anchor, my, and that's the third person, both singular and plural, we can use it for, and it's more like the there is, but it's without the there. It's just this one word, my. And I found myself thinking about all the things that are, the thing that is still, even though we're locked inside, door shut, and the poems that were coming to my mind were the ones that are my dilycoed yn ystrad fflir, my murmur yn yr awel. And you know, when we're taught to perform poems, performance poetry is the only kind of poetry we know, you know, to recite a poem, then you don't put an emphasis on the verb to be. That's not the important thing. It's what it is that's important. But no, I thought, no, now we really need the emphasis on the my. And yeah, so, you know, my dilycoed, my murmur yn yr awel, my un friallen fach ar lawr, my can am benryn tawel. And I went through all of the things I could reference until the final verse, and I wrote something like agos o hyd bod llinell bell di derfyn, gwn fod darfod, mai dyddiau blin yn dod I ben, mai amser gwell yn dyfod. And a year on, we're still waiting for that better day to come, but it is going to come, and it is there. Just not quite arrived yet, but it's coming our way.
I'm reminded of a verse from the Psalms where the imperative would be still and know that I am God. And there's a lovely meditation on it where on the page they just be still and know that I am God, be still and know that I am, be still and know, be still, be.
Yeah, da iawn. Yeah, bod.
Just pause, and actually be. We've been talking also about rootedness as well, and I think that the rootedness within self, I think that that's the sort of what God wants us to have is that sense of being at peace with ourselves, with others, with God, with the world.
And that brought us to the discussion about, again, when we think of that word peace, if we say that, you know, we've got two words for peace in Welsh. So we've got heddwch, which, you know, many people will know, even if they don't know the Welsh language from just watching the Eisteddfod. By the way, I didn't win all of those in 1 year. I have... And that would have been quite something, but you know, when you get to that stage and you're waiting for your crown or your chair, and that big sword comes up and it says, "Oes heddwch," is their peace, and that word we chime back is heddwch. Oh, we've lost Sarah. She didn't like the word.
Get the phone out of the way. Shut the phone.
I thought you didn't like the word sword. It is the sword of peace, so you're all right. But then the other word we have is tangnefedd, and this is less used. I think we should start a campaign to just use this word tangnefedd. We should. It appears in the Bible. It appears in Matthew 5, the Bregeth ar y Mynydd, the Sermon on the Mount. But we need, I think, to reclaim it, bring it out to the Bible and into just the street. Because what does it mean? What kind of a peace is it? Well, I've been looking back at this word, And even in its earliest forms, tank, without the tang never, it is always between. That preposition is always there. And as far as I can work out, it's between either yourself and somebody else. So that's a peace that's between you and somebody else, maybe somebody you've quarreled with. And now we are at peace, and you've made this peace. It hasn't just landed there. It's been an effort. Gwneud tank vorom. And then the other thing, it can be between you and, as my grandmother from Pembrokeshire used to call, a bod mawr, the great being. So that was God. A bod mawr. And I love that. So it can be between you and this thing that's not you, the thing that's outside, creator, whatever. But it can also be between you and yourself. Yes. So a corff ar enaid, the body and the soul. And that's the wholeness, isn't it? That's the cyfannu that you were talking about, Sarah. So it is a lovely word. Tan never.
Yes. Certainly within the church framework, when we talk about sharing the peace with one another, it's that we're wanting to share. And in some cases, I mean, you're talking about, in a sense, working for it, and blessed are the peacemakers.
The makers, exactly. The tang neveddwyr. We had one word for it in Welsh. That must have been a eureka moment for the translator. Oh, I know what we'll say here.
But I think also there's a sense that the tang nevedd is also, it's the peace of God, which is God's gift. Jesus, my peace I give you, not as the world gives, do I. And I love the phrase that St. Paul uses in his letter to the Philippians about the peace of God that passes all understanding, guards our hearts and our minds, that guards are, that when you've got that sort of peace, it passes understanding, not because it's incomprehensible, but it's that sense it's beyond our capacity fully to pin down, but that it comes to us and we experience it. And when we are held in God's peace, not just the Greek word, the irene, but also the Hebrew word, the shalom, it has the connotations of, I suppose, about a harmony of life and about a freedom of everything being, all will be well and all will be well and all manner of things will be well, as Julian of Norwich says, of that wholesomeness. And here's a sort of an English twist. Holy and wholesomeness, whole, and health in English all have the same root origins. And so we see the synergy amongst that. But when we're held in that shalom sense, we have the freedom of being at ease with ourselves, with God.
However,
it's a shalom.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Abundant life.
But yes, but I wouldn't want us to lose sight of that effort thing, the thing that we can't expect it just to land upon us. I think you have to, gwneud, that make peace. And am I right to think that it does only appear in that Matthew 5, eiron o poios or something?
Yes. The words that in Matthew's Gospel, blessed are the peacemakers. It's the only time that it's there. But I suspect when Paul is, because often he sort of talks about striving to achieve something at the same point as it's becoming as a gift. And I think that's part of it. It's not quite attentiveness, but it's about deliberately wanting to align ourselves with what makes for good and healthy living. And so that I think that there is that sense of striving for it, and yet also passively being open to receive something that is bigger and beyond us as well, that we work for it and we...
But, and I think the important there too is not to lose sight of that peace with other people. And we come back to that cymdogaeth that you were talking about earlier. It's not just I'm all right and I'm at peace, but I have to be at peace with others. And go back to the medieval law of Wales, and there were 5 kind of the big 5, and I've written them down here. Well, in Welsh, gwys a hawl ag ateb ar barn a thangnefedd, but in English that would be something like, so you're summoned, you have a notice, but you've got rights. And then there's a period of response, and then a judgment is reached, but it doesn't end there. There's a fifth, and the fifth is tang never. So you leave then friends, you know, you've, and that, you don't leave bearing a grudge.
No.
You know, but it's just so it's not over until people are reconciled, and I love that.
Yes. So I've just seen that somebody's commented, do we not have to find the peace rather than making it and finding it within us before being able to engage with others? I suspect that we're operating on all fronts at the same time, and I think so. Yes, and each of us will perhaps have different needs dependent on where we are in our life's journey, our characteristics, personalities, and experiences. And that was another word that we were we got quite excited about when we were talking earlier, and it was this sense of the difference of knowing that's just your sort of head knowing, and the knowing at a much more profound and comprehensive way. And English doesn't make that distinction between, I mean, in French, connaître and savoir, and the capacity to know about something in an intellectual way. That's like what the knowing of the relational knowing and the experiential knowing.
That's right, and we do, of course, gwybod ag adnabod. So I don't know you because I only know facts, but I adnabod you. And I'm just telling you that the further, I didn't see the comment chat, but just going back to that, I think, you know, finding and making, I mean, in the finding, there is also an effort, isn't it? You have to, was it the distinction between find and making? I think there is an element of, it's not just, it doesn't just come upon you. I think that element of effort, anyway, but we're on nabod now. And again, I think, you know, this is key to Waldo, who was often in the spirit, and I don't know, I don't know whether this is fanciful, but he has, and it was unusual in the time, he has the list of contents in alphabetical order, which puts his poem Adna Bod as the first thing you see, and yet where has he put his poem Adna Bod? Right in the middle of the collection. And it's, if you want to understand Waldo, I think you have to come to grips with what this is. The poem itself, under the title Adna Bod, which is, as you say, like the reconnaître or whatever, this knowing that's deeper than knowing a fact. It's, you can Adna Bod a place, and certainly a person, and a God. You know, that's an Adna Bod too. But the poem is long, and he tells us often what it is. You know, I've got some Tiw and Hanadl, you are our breath. This Adna Bod is that basic. Tiw'r halen in puro, you are the salt to purify, or to make us pure. Tiw'r deifwynt i'r hwysg amdanon, you're that wind that can cut through all the pomp that we like to surround ourselves with. Tiw'r teithiwr sy'n curo, you're the traveller knocking on the door. You know, somebody you have to let in. Tiw'r tywysog sy'n aros ynom, you're the prince that stays within us. Prince and tywysog, if you look them up, you'd find them next to each other in dictionary. Of course, they don't mean the same thing. Prince comes from prime, principle. Tywysog comes from the guide. But then it comes to the end. Tiw'r eiliad olau. You're that moment of light. You know, and that's the finding, I imagine. But he's got another image in a different poem where he says, beth yw Adna Bod? What is it to know, to recognize, to understand? And he says, cael un gwraidd dan y canghennau. Translated, it means finding that one root underneath all the branches. So no matter how different we may look, seem, if you dig deep enough, you'll come to the place where we all come to the same thing. We all come from the same thing. We all come to the same thing. Oh, you know, Waldo, come on, Pembrokeshire people, any St David's ideas, they're all in this book. Dail Pren, Waldo Williams, a famous Pembrokeshire poet, famous Welsh poet, and as I think I said before, in the Quakers' friend's house on Euston Road in London, they've got 2 rooms named after Waldo Williams, and he's ours.
What was the title?
Can I just say someone in the Q&A, because we're getting towards the time where I just wanted to see what questions we'd had. And someone commented, Mererid, when you read from Waldo earlier, the lobby may be the liminal threshold, indicating a transcendence.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's lovely. The liminal transcendence. Yes, transcendence. Oh, of course. Lobby is an unfortunate word because, of course, it's lent itself to the lobbyists and I think, Sarah, the noise and so on that you were talking about, it's absent from cyntedd. You know,
yeah. I mean, because it can be a large space. I think. I mean, that sense of the liminality is that sometimes there is a lot of noise going on as you try and work out where you're crossing one from one.
But that's right. But I think that threshold thing is wonderful. And I remember because my family comes from Pembrokeshire, and the kind of the door. Imagine this now. My mother and grandmother would say, "There's somebody in the door." Now. And I remember as a child writing this, I was brought up in Cardiff, saying, "Oh, ma rhywun yn y drws," and the teacher corrected me saying, no, somebody's at the door. But that's the door in a street, you know, the houses down where there's a little lobby around them, you know, there's little kind of porchy kind of thing. And that's also a cyntedd, can be. So it's that place where we meet. You know, you can be in the door. And that was a concept for me that clearly wasn't for my teacher.
I think something else that I find interesting, it came up in one of the talks earlier, is that some people refer to Pembrokeshire as a kind of liminal place, a threshold, both because they're referring to the ancient Celtic traditions as they understand them, but also because it's this gateway to Ireland and obviously pilgrims. And I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
Well, there is a sort of concept of this being a thin place. You know, it's as though you can sort of put your hand out and you pass from this world to the next in some sort of way, or that perhaps I would construe it in the way that just with the light of the sea on three sides of the peninsula and all of that, it gives one a sense of mental, spiritual spaciousness. Yeah. Which perhaps, then allows the capacity to do this reflective, deep thing, even to the transcendent within oneself, rather than to be stuck at the very superficial, busy level.
I'm not sure. I think if you're from Pembrokeshire, you know, this is a question of perspective.
Yes.
And people like to say, well, I think I can share the story. I won't name anybody. But somebody who used to go to a chapel in Pembrokeshire, her son had moved to London, and eventually she was persuaded to go and visit him. And when she came back, she was asked, so how did you like it in London? And she replied, "It's all right, but it's far from everywhere." And that's the point, you know. I think for people from Pembrokeshire, it is the centre. And I teach in Aberystwyth, as you've heard, and some people, I heard somebody saying that that it's just peripheral. I thought to myself, goodness me, is it? You know, for the Welsh psyche, Aberystwyth is in the middle. It's halfway from, you know, Bangor, and it is a question of perspective. So I think I would hesitate from. These are lovely romantic ideas, and I'm sure that there are elements of truth there, but I think if you're from Pembrokeshire, then, you know, this is the centre, and this is where everything else starts from.
And people come here to get away from wherever it is they're starting.
Yes.
We're actually living here.
Yeah, so exactly.
I pick up something else that we talked about in the week, which is actually, you talked about Waldo and that rootedness.
Yes.
And actually, the thing that from that I wanted to talk about resilience, the way that it's not just a one-off thing to have a healthy spiritual, emotional soul life, but that's that actually part of that strength
And I did look that up then, because we shared that word rhythm that came to my mind, and rhythm is, and I was thinking, well, what is rhythm? I mean, I know it's something to do with a tree, and it's what was the word, the heartwood. It's the hardest part of the tree, but that's not how we normally use it. We use it in this sense that it's, you know, when you have to put both feet on the ground and find that thing that will sustain you. And this is what it means. Are you ready for this long list? This one word. It means the essence, the core, the center, the strength of character, the integrity, the moral fiber, the courage, the bravery, the stamina. So all of that is in that word rhythm. And I think, you know, we all need to know where it is and to be able to find it when the going gets tough. You have to go back to the rhythm.
Yes.
Yeah, and that word resilience, you see, that's another interesting one. I mean, gwydnwch is what we'd say in Welsh, and that gwydnwch is a flexibility without fragility. I think that's what I decided I was going to define it as. I suppose that's in resilience, you know, it can spring back. So you can go, but you're not going to snap.
Yes.
And that's the quality of a tree that, you know, we're often is often used as a reference. For instance, someone who practices yoga like myself, we're supposed to be like a tree, in that we're flexible.
Well, I'm sure you've noticed the Pembrokeshire trees, and they're not fast trees, but they don't give in. They may have to bend east, but they're not giving in.
Yes. One of the title of our part of the title we were giving was Willing Wellbeing, which is about how do we go about, and we talked about sort of the sense of living with hope, with gobaith a disgwyl, but it's about that developing persistent habits and practices individually together that actually help us sustain that resilience of well-being amongst ourselves, isn't it?
And I think we come back to that thing of the finding and the making and the effort, because again, as with Heddwch, I think hope people, there's a difference between just being optimistic and having hope, because hope needs to be turned into something. It is a beth yw gweithredol, I've got blankets, you know, it is action there. And this year, of course, we've been talking about Waldo Williams, but the other Welshman, and it's his centenary this year, is Raymond Williams. He, you remember, said, to be truly radical is to make hope possible, not despair convincing, it goes on to say. And I think, you know, that's we have to it is the conviction and the confidence that the thing we're waiting for is going to happen, but we've got to take part in making that happen. I think we have to, the belief that hope can be nurtured in order to execute changes.
Yes, and I think the faith tradition would just tick all those boxes with you. Again, there's that sense of the gift, but you've damn well got to work for it.
And it may not be rational, but it is the thing that can cause change.
Yes, and actually it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, and in that sense that if you live hopefully in terms of your committed, sustained action, that is deliver it.
It's a functional, that was the word I was searching for. It's a functional virtue. It's not a passive thing. It's, you know, it's obvious. And if you want hope, again, here's the guy, you know, he has one poem that was written actually for the people of Pembrokeshire, for the people in Castle Martin who were thrown out of their homes to make way for the military. You know, that's a whole story that we have to get to grips with. But the coed ends, it's full of despair. You know, this place is empty. The sound of the children has gone, and blah, blah, blah. But then it comes to the last line: Dawr wennol yn ôl yw nyth. The swallow will come back to her nest. And that is just hope dawr wennol yn ôl i'w nyth. And then that sonnet I was talking about where at the beginning, where he talks about the cyntedd maith mod, the large doorway, lobby, vestibule, porch, whatever, of my being. It ends with this line, gobaith von meistr, rhoid amser I ni'n was. Let hope be the master. Let time be the servant. And that again shows, I need time to get this hope thing I'm hoping for to become. I'm going to need a bit of time, but it will happen. I love that. Gobaith von meistr, rhoid amser I ni'n was. And that's kept me going through this lockdown.
Yes, I suppose the thing that springs to mind is carpe diem, seize the day, seize the time, in that sense of making it work, making it be the servant, not
yes,
not the
not
thing
the master,
not the master.
Yeah.
So many of the virtues, you have to work out which side of the line they are in terms of masters and servants, because some of them are very poor masters, but really excellent servants.
Yeah. And time, you were talking about Pembrokeshire there, and I know that between us, there is such a thing as a Pembrokeshire time. I'm sure you've gathered that by now. And I think maybe it's because the day lasts longer there. It lingers longer before it sinks.
Yes.
And maybe that's why.
It's true. I mean, the sun goes over the horizon, but it's reflected by the sea and the clouds for a long time after. There is a very special light that's on this particular peninsula. Certainly that.
Someone's commented, hope needs a plan. I think that's a response to, but I think it's rather lovely.
That's great. There's a poem in that line for sure.
Yeah. And it chimes with what Molly Roach from Solver Care was saying in her talk yesterday, that, as communities or neighbourhoods, we can't wait for things to be brought to us or done for us, or even done in partnership. Sometimes we actually have to take the radical acts, which again relates to the quote you gave. I think to be truly radical is to make hope possible.
And how does that end? The quote in its entirety has this last clause: to be truly radical is to make hope convincing. Is to make hope possible, not despair convincing.
Yes.
And people think that they're going to, frighten people into making change by saying this terrible thing is going to happen if not. That's not what being radical is about. And I think these are days where we need some radical action.
Yes. There's a question here from Heather. How do you both envisage bringing this underlying hope of spirituality into reality for a broad spectrum of the community?
I'd like to pick up that, to link that with the question of what we do when bad things happen which don't appear to be sources of hope, and where the temptation is to despair, because something that struck me is that we have to recapture from the faith traditions the capacity to do lament, because lament, it's not complaining. You're not going round in the poor old me ever decreasing circle of the badness of it, but it's about really naming and calling out everything that is wrong, and to sort of fathom the expanse of what the struggle is. In a sense, to sort of to feel the dimensions of it. But it's not about despairing. It's about saying, this is it. And there's that calling out to God, to the other, in order that you lament, in order to say, this will not do, therefore, we must go forward. And perhaps part of building hope is to go back to it. One of the things we talked about right at the very beginning is learning to listen to ourselves, to the community, to each other, not in a self-indulgent way, but so that we can lament where we need to, in order that, recognizing the situation we are coming out of, that becomes then the springboard of where we want to go to. We haven't talked in this session about COVID, and I think that actually there are all sorts of opportunities to press reset buttons and to say, commit ourselves together to live with constructive hope tangibly beyond where we are now.
We've just got a minute. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Eleanor? Sorry, Mererid.
Linda was in the start before.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I have. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be able to think out loud.
Yes.
Well, I take it that we're three, and you tell me that there are others there.
Oh,
in a way, it's nice that we can't see nobody
we've
else.
Probably got 50 people, I think, have been with us. Yeah.
Maybe.
And somebody has just said we need an effective inquiry to give a plan a solid start. What do you think that means? It's hard to know, but
I think it's about the intentionality of our truly listening, but purposefully, in order to draw out the best in one another, to help one another flourish, to help one another to have, you know, holistic well-being, if you want to go back to that. It just seemed that the spell check has been interrupting. Affirmative inquiry. Amen to that.
Yes.
To listen, that sense of.
And this listening, if I may suggest that the listening, the values that we can have by listening with more than one ear, and that is to say in more than one language. The benefits of that are enormous, and we're very slow to recognize that. Just think of those words, listening and speaking and talking. In Welsh, you listen on, and you never talk to. You always talk with. And so there's the dialogue inherent in that before you even start, and that, I think, is, you know, there are so many wisdoms that we can gain from these from bringing these two things together. And then in Pembrokeshire you've got the added third language of the Demetian dialect, which is hugely rich and has all sorts of other ways again of seeing. And talk about listening, here's one word that's died, and it's in this book, and that's all about listening, and it's nothing to do with our conversation, but I will just throw it in here. Wellawell. And what does that mean? It means the sound of the wind in the leaves of trees at the end of the day. Now there's one word for that, wellawell, and that calls for a good amount of listening to hear that.
Well, that's a beautiful note to end on. We're going to have to finish now, but thank you very much to both of you, to Mererid Hopwood and to Sarah Rowland-Jones, and to everybody who's joined us, for your comments, for your attention. And as I said earlier, I think this is going to be available on the website, probably from Monday. And please spread the word with your friends if you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Oh, diolch yn fawr iawn. Wel nawr.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.